We live in an era of information overload and short attention spans. Whether you are giving a talk in a conference or a lecture in a classroom, it is really important to start your speech with impact so that you can hook your audience right from the beginning before they start scrolling through their smartphones. In this video, I'll share with you 3 creative ways that I use to start my talks using examples. And if you stick around till the end, I'm going to share with you 7 other ways you can start your speech. Before we dive into the different speech openings, I want to remind you of what you shouldn't do. The first one is acknowledgements. Many people are fond of thanking the audience, thanking the host for inviting them. This is not the time for that. The opening of your speech is the time to engage your audience. So, thank you for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here this morning. Thank you for your kind introduction. Avoid acknowledgements right at the beginning of your speech. Another thing that many of us are fond of doing is to apologize. I'm really sorry that my voice is a bit funny this morning. Sorry, I'm feeling a bit nervous. No, if you feel nervous, this is normal. You don't have to announce to the whole audience that you're feeling nervous. When you do that, they just keep looking out for cues about your nervousness and they don't listen to what you are saying. So you don't have to apologize at the beginning of your talk. And also make sure you check the technical stuff before the talk starts so that you don't spend the first few seconds of your talk checking technical things like, can you hear me clearly? Those at the back, can you see my slides? And all that. This is not the time for that. So use the first few seconds of your talk to engage the audience. Now, let's look at ways to open a talk with impact. The first is to show a stimulating visual. So this could be a picture, an image, or an object. Visuals are powerful in the sense that they cause your audience to start thinking about what you're going to say, so you hook them right from the beginning. I'll now show you an example where I showed an image at the beginning of a lecture.
So what do you think is going on in this picture? When you take a look on this picture, what ideas come into your mind?
So just to give you a bit of context, I was going to teach about how specific molecules on the surface of membranes help cells to identify invaders and then alert the immune system to launch an attack on them. So before I introduce the topic for the day, I showed an image and I asked the students to think about what was going on in the image. This was really great because the students didn't know what it was going to be about, what the image meant. So they started brainstorming about it and people were giving answers about what they thought was going on before I told them what we're going to deal with on that day. So that's like a nice way to engage the students or any audience. You can also use it in a presentation. The second way I like to open my talks is to ask a question. So it could be a rhetorical question where you don't expect an answer from the audience, or you only ask these questions to arouse interest, to emphasize some ideas, or even to challenge the listener. Or you can also ask an answerable question where people give answers, or you ask a question that makes people to raise their hands or to get up or to do something. So let's see an example where I used a rhetorical question. So this was in a conference where I spoke about my CO2 capture project, and at the opening of my talk, I used a rhetorical question. On the 4th of November 2016, the Paris Agreement entered into force. The Paris Agreement was signed by 193 states plus the European Commission, and according to this agreement, we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in order to limit the global temperature increase to 1.5 to 2 degrees centigrade. Have you ever wondered why we should be concerned about a degree or two change in the average global temperature? This is another example of an answerable question which I used in my recent video on CV and cover letter preparation. So
How much time do you think a recruiter spends on an initial scan of a candidate's CV? I want you to pause the video, note your answer down, and then continue watching.
I started the video with a question to the audience. If the audience don't know how much time a recruiter spends, they would want to find out, and so then you hook their attention right from the beginning. Another example of an answerable question that I use also in a lecture setting.
I'm just curious, how many of you know your blood groups? And if you know your blood group, what does it mean to have a blood group of A positive or B negative?
So we were going to talk about blood grouping in this course. And so it was a nice opening to ask this question and to engage the students before you even start talking about the topic. The third way I usually like to start my talks is to share a story. So you start with a story. We all love stories because they evoke imagery and emotions, and they can help your audience to connect with you, and this will make you more interesting and also memorable, so people want to listen to you. I will just show you an example where I give a talk on my postdoctoral work. During my PhD, I designed hierarchically porous adsorbents for carbon dioxide capture. And in my defense, one of the committee members asked me, so what are we going to do with all that carbon dioxide that you're going to capture with your material? Well, I wasn't expecting that question, and so I had to think very fast on my feet. So I told the committee that we can convert the CO2 into some useful products such as fuels. And so when I was preparing to do my postdoctoral research, I decided to fulfill the promise that I made to my PhD defense committee. And so I went into a new field of photocatalysis to study how we can convert carbon dioxide, which is considered a waste product, into useful materials. So in this example, I used a story to bridge how I went from my PhD research into a new field of photocatalysis. I did not speak about the title slide. I was introduced by the host of the program, and so I didn't have to say anything about my title slide or the topic that I was going to speak about. I just went directly into the story and I started from there. So yeah, this is just an example how you can use a story at the beginning of a speech. These are three of my favorite ways of starting a talk or a lecture. I hope you will find them useful. And now I will share with you other examples of how you can start a talk or a lecture. The first is you don't start at the beginning. So you either start at the end or in the middle. So you first share the end of your story or the topic you are going to talk about. What is the result? That creates some suspense in your audience. So they want to find out how did you get there? And then you take them through. So you hook their attention with suspense. So another way that you can start a talk is to share a shocking statistic. So for example, did you know that workers who sit for longer than 10 hours a day at their desk have a 48% increase in risk of death? Did you know that over 40% of countries have fewer than 10 medical doctors per 10,000 people? So this is a shocking statistic to many people. And so when you ask this, they are curious to learn more, and so they will listen to you. Another way you can start a talk with impact is to use humor. So this depends entirely on your personality and the topic you are going to speak about, but you need to really be careful with that because if it doesn't work, it will be a bit awkward. So if you are good with using humor, you can start your talk with humor and then you get the audience into this mood. You get them to laugh and then they'll be warmer towards you and more willing to listen to you. Another way is to start with a quote or you can start with a demonstration. So if you are going to talk about something that works in a certain way, you can bring the object with you and demonstrate how it works. You can also share something which is currently in the news. For example, if you're talking about vaccine or I don't know, some developments in which is currently in the news. Maybe it's related to the COVID or something which is current. You can share that as part of your opening to your talk. You can also use the power of imagination. So you ask your audience to imagine something, and once you ask them to imagine something, you are creating this image in their minds, and then they would listen to you and follow along. So these are other ways you can start a talk with impact. I hope you will try these openings out in your next speech, and if you find them helpful, please like and share it with others. Happy speaking.